As a child growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, I grew up with a large variety of games, including such genres as racing, horror, platformers, first-person shooters, and above all, RPGs. One of my favorite games growing up was a classic 3D dungeon crawler action RPG game by the name of Gauntlet Dark Legacy. Gauntlet Dark Legacy was kind of a mix between a expansion to and sequel of Gauntlet Legends, both games being popular arcade games that eventually got subsequent console ports soon after the fact. The PC platform has never really been a very welcoming home for these kinds of D&D inspired action RPG dungeon crawler games, and while some indie developers have occasionally tried taking a crack at bringing them to PC to varying degrees of success, most of these games have found a home instead on mobile platforms. Thanks to the rapid evolution of mobile technology, your average HD tablet can easily run GPU and CPU intensive games that would normally have proven challenging for most mid-range PC gaming rigs merely one generation ago. We've discussed this technological gap between mobile and traditional gaming before, so I'm not going to berate the point much longer, but I felt it was important to once again reiterate this in relation to why many RPG games are choosing to optimize for mobile release. As most traditional RPG games are especially renowned for such gameplay concepts and mechanics like replayability, loot grinding, character classes, weapon and ability upgrades, and more, I think it's safe to at least partially base any critique or other constructive criticisms for an action RPG game upon these very foundations. Hello everybody, this is WarriorDan, and today we'll be taking a look at Darkness Rises. Darkness Rises is a hack-and-slash action RPG imbued with some dungeon crawler mechanics. Developed and published by Nexon, Darkness Rises was initially released back in 2017, and to this day has remained actively supported by the development team with regular new content patches and related developer communication and engagement with the community. I mention this because it's always a plus in my book when a developer and/or publisher consistently takes the time to maintain an open and reciprocal dialogue with their respective community. From the onset of the game, Darkness Rises does the opposite of most games, and instead of initiating the game by having the player undergo a tedious tutorial sequence where even the most obvious of gameplay mechanics such as the tutorials PC players are accustomed to, which all teach us obvious facts like how WASD are the primary movement keys, Darkness Rises focuses on introducing some of the more broader concepts, such as familiarizing the player with the fluid combat system, educating them on how to correctly time combos, introducing them to some of the objectives and additional in-game challenges that they will later become accustomed to, and how to effectively navigate the fairly cumbersome menu user interface. All of this is gradually brought to the player's attention over the course of the initial hour or so of play, with some more advanced features being unlocked later into the game. So let's talk about some of the modes present in the game. Firstly, there is the story mode, split into individual levels, with each level heavily laden with conversation-based text exposition, very reminiscent of traditional Japanese-developed RPGs. Personally, I found these levels to be fairly tedious in nature, so I didn't spend much more time than was necessary in order to unlock some of the other alternate game modes. The second mode, and my personal favorite, the adventure mode, eliminates a lot of the more burdensome lore and doubles down on the raw gameplay experience, with a stronger focus placed on combating bosses and mini-bosses. From the few hours I've spent in the adventure mode thus far, the mode features easily well over a dozen boss types, and probably more that I haven't counted, each with their own unique short intro cinematic, their own unique designed character model, and their own specific fighting style. This does help reduce one of the biggest inherent problems with most other comparable loot-driven RPGs, and that is grind. You want players to grind to unlock better weapons, better cosmetics, etc. But many RPGs, especially on mobile, take this too far, to the point that grinding for even the most basic of rewards can be excruciatingly boring and come away leaving the player feeling unfulfilled. Each campaign in the adventure mode features 10 levels, and usually an additional final boss encounter, after which point the player can proceed into the next campaign if they meet the requirements. As the player proceeds farther into a campaign in any of the available modes, the levels will steadily increase the power level requirement. Power levels here in the game operate similarly to the ones found in games like Destiny 2, where the player has both a player level, otherwise referred to as a account level, which is leveled up through gaining experience from quests and so on, and a power level, which is increased by acquiring gear and other loot that will make your character more powerful. However, unlike Destiny 2, players will not find themselves efficiently banned from participating in higher difficulty quests just because their power level isn't quite high enough. However, the lower your power level is in comparison to the recommended power level, level, you may find that level to be increasingly and indescribably harder than otherwise necessary. When selecting a mission, you'll see your power level number displayed on screen alongside the recommended power level. If your number is colored in red, I would recommend not playing that level, unless you prefer to play Darkness Rises like you would Dark Souls. For those who wouldn't prefer that experience, I wouldn't recommend jumping into a level unless your power level is at least within the yellow parameter. The yellow coloring indicates that while your level might be challenging, it is within a very reasonable difficulty, and if you play your cards right, there's no reason you can't win. Green is kind of an obvious indicator. If you see your power level indicated as green, compared to the recommended power level, you will likely experience little to no trouble playing through that level. And in fact, depending on what your power level actually is, indicated in the green, you may find the level to be ridiculously easy. Adventure levels are usually pretty short, ranging from between 30 seconds and 5 minutes, depending on the difficulty and any other factors, such as a boss fight getting in the way. Like many mobile games on the market, players are restricted somewhat from just playing through the entire campaign in one sitting. In order to play a level, you must spend 2 keys. By default, players start with 20 keys, and if you've blown through all your keys, you have to wait on a cooldown to unlock each new key, a process that can individually take a few minutes apiece per key. Alternatively, you could just choose to buy additional keys, but in all my time playing, I never really felt incentivized or pressured to do so at any point. While I didn't actively keep a clock measuring the re-emergence of my keys, at one point I did put down the game after running out of keys for about an hour to watch Netflix and then came back to find them all maxed out again. So by that estimate, if I got back 20 keys within 1 hour, that works out to be 1 key every 3 minutes, or in other words, every 180 seconds. Given this game is free to play and also compared to other ridiculous cooldowns featured in other mobile games like Fallout Shelter, my only real gripe with the monetization in Darkness Rises is the frequent pop-up ads on the main menu when you're not actively in a game. In 1 hour alone, I got hassled to buy outrageously priced loot box bundles easily over a dozen times. It's almost as bad as the in-game DLC ads for Star Wars Battlefront 1 back in 2015. Going back to PvE, in addition to the story and adventure modes, players can also enjoy several other modes, including Gold Dungeon, Daily Dungeon, and Infinity Dungeon. Gold Dungeon is basically the Darkness Rises take on the classic Batman Arkham Asylum inspired and popularized wave-based minion brawl mode. Beating a level in this mode will reward you with gold that can be used for character upgrades or other improvements. It's a much more consistent way of earning gold, as opposed to some of the other available game modes. As you unlock more Gold Dungeon levels, the amount of gold offered as a reward for beating them will scale upwards too. In addition to the PvE mode, which can be played either offline or online, there are 2 dedicated online modes, coming in the form of co-op, where you and one other player can face off against waves of monsters and accomplish story mode inspired objectives together. Or if you choose, you can enter a 4-player co-op dungeon where you face off against and quickly obliterate a giant boss monster, often in less time than it takes to do a adventure level. This is kind of disappointing when you think about it, as in no RPG should the player or players be able to finish off an enormous dungeon boss in less time than it takes to watch a Geico ad on TV. And you have PvP, where players face off in one-on-one arenas where the best man or woman wins. I'm not really a big PvP fan. When I played it, I did well enough and had a decent amount of fun thoroughly smashing my opponents, but the co-op mode I particularly enjoyed, and as of the time of recording, have put in roughly under an hour of playing. As for the Daily Dungeon, this mode is essentially a daily challenge mode, where the player is presented with a random set of rules and conditions and granted a reward for accomplishing them. I didn't spend much time in the Daily Dungeon mode, as the other modes proved more interesting to me, so I can't really talk much about it here, other than it just felt like a necessary tacked on component in order to place additional artificial levels of engagement in order to incentivize daily play, a tactic all too common in the mobile market and one that is becoming increasingly and uncomfortably commonplace in the AAA gaming marketplace. Overall, Darkness Rises looks like one of the highest production value action RPGs currently on the mobile marketplace, and while it won't necessarily tear me away from my deeper love of dedicated PC and console games, I do think this will be a game I'll probably come back to more than once within the next few days and weeks, as new content presumably continues to be added to the core experience. On that note, I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up for this video. Tell me what you think of Darkness Rises down in the comments below, and give this video a thumbs up if you found it at all informative or entertaining. If you would like to see more What is the Point of videos like this one here tonight, hit that subscribe button down below and opt into getting notifications so YouTube might actually tell you when one of my next videos goes live. This is WarriorDan signing out. Stay awesome everybody, and peace out.